All right, away we go. It's two guys in two cities on the Three Guys in Three Cities podcast. Andy is a quick scratch tonight. He's got some things going on, so he will not be with us on the podcast. But there's Josh Flagner in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Allan Fee in the Great Pacific Northwest in the hometown of Bellingham, Washington. And again, no representation from the great state of Michigan as Andy's tending to some family stuff. And we wish him all the best and his family. Josh, how are you, my friend?
Great, man. This is two shows in a row, or not in a row, but two shows since we kind of re-upped here that Andy has completely and absolutely ditched us. I'm a little disappointed.
You know, but at the end of the day, though, and again, I'd like to fire a cheap shot at the guy, but we are pretty ditchable. We have some ditchability. You know
Speak for yourself, buddy.
Well, I'm just saying, I know that I've been taking a bit of a beat down on this podcast. Everyone's like, so are the dry runs over yet? Are you guys going to be doing the actual podcast now? I'm like, no, that has been the actual podcast. So
yeah, oops. I tell you what, though, who was our second listener, the guy that you got some feedback from?
Well, we get a lot of feedback. We just don't report a lot of it because it's not necessarily, even though it's a podcast, I'm not sure we want to share all that. But we have listener Ray, of course. We have listener Wayne. Listener Gary sometimes checks in. Listener Woody is in and out of this. Obviously he's a dear friend of the show. I mean, they're all dear friends of the show, but we got a bunch of randos also that listen to the podcast. And frankly, I've reached the point where maybe we should just not know. Maybe that's just the better angle to take with this and just not know who's out there.
I do like knowing, though. I got to tell you, the feedback that I got, though, that you gave us about the dry runs and some of the content that we were doing.
Yeah.
That really, I sent a text over the last couple of weeks, like over that break, and I was like, that really kind of weighed me down. I think that we need to do a little bit more. So I got one of those, those fancy prize wheels, like those. So what I did was tape a bunch of different topics to the prize wheel, and it's right off screen. You're not going to be able to see it. Right. But I taped a bunch of different topics to the prize wheel, and I figured that I would spin it, and then I can tell you what we're going to talk about. Or if you want, I can have one installed in your studio, and you can spin it, and then you can tell us what we're talking about.
No, I think that you're more technologically inclined to make this happen. Yeah, and just going back, if I can, just for a minute, I think one of the problems we have on this podcast is the definition of the word content. Some say it might be some interesting topics, perhaps, that we would banter about. I think we've brought it down to the lowest level of content is whatever keeps the VU meter moving, and it creates sound. If it creates sound, it's content, and I think we need to raise the bar just a little bit on that.
I think you're probably right. I really do think you're right. So here's what I did. Let me go ahead and spin that wheel. Then, are you ready for our first? What should we call it?
The Wheel of Topics.
The Wheel of Topics. You know what?
Sure.
I bet you no other podcast has done that. So let me go ahead.
I'm sure they never have. Oh boy. Oh boy.
It's a big wheel.
Oh boy.
Oh, all right. So it was, you know what? It really worked out because that last click, it was gonna be something that I really wanted the three of us to be here together to talk about. But since Andy's not here, that last click, thankfully, it popped us over to a sports topic.
Oh, now, there you go.
Last week or the week before, I can't really remember. I'm not great at dates, which is not great for, sort of producing the show.
Right.
In a 24-hour period, Nick Saban retired, Bill Belichick retired, and Pete Carroll, I don't know, you're the Seattle sports guy. Was Pete Carroll fired?
Pete Carroll was asked to not return. Uh, Pete Carroll was not fired.
Fired?
He wanted to coach this next year. He liked the team. He quote unquote fought for the job, and they said no. So, however you want to package that up, his services were not retained. Maybe that's the best way to say it. But
Okay,
fired is
sounds fired.
I mean, but well, he come on. First, it's Pete Carroll. I mean, he's Mr. Positive. You got to come up with some modern day, lay it on him gently kind of. Pete. Thank you for your 14 years. You made it to the playoffs, 10 of 14 years. Thanks for the Super Bowl, but they didn't say that.
So you mentioned, 14 years in Seattle, their playoffs 10 of the 14 years. I wanted to go over some quick numbers from those three guys.
Mm-hmm.
904 wins, 18 championships, Super Bowls and national championships. Pete Carroll famously is the only guy I think ever to win a Super Bowl and a college national championship. And 148 years of head coaching experience in college or the pros for those three guys. I could go on and on and on about individual records, Saban's dominance, Belichick's dominance, Carroll's ability to be great across both sports, which is something neither guy could do. You put all those three guys together, and it really made me think, outside of just football, when have we ever seen in one day that much greatness and history leave a sport or an industry or anything all at once?
Wow, that's a great question. It is interesting. I mean, obviously, if you're doing the math on Belichick and Pete Carroll, what is Pete 70 and Belichick 71? I mean, at some point, I mean that's almost the male life expectancy. Pete Carroll obviously has got some kind of cryogenics thing going. He's going to live longer than all of us. But I mean, obviously, those guys, you had to believe the time was running out. Pete Carroll made the playoffs once in the last 3 years. So if he's going 10 of the last 14, but one in the last three, and that playoff run that they went on last year, they needed Detroit to go up to Green Bay and win that game for Seattle to back into the playoffs. And then they almost did it again this year, except this time Chicago didn't beat Green Bay. So you could say that it's more like almost a 3-year drought where the team controlled their own destiny, making the playoffs. And obviously, ever since Tom Brady left, the Patriots were never able to recover. So we knew the clock was ticking, and the timeline just kind of timed out. Nick Saban, what else does the guy have to do? 6 championships, one at LSU, so 7 total championships. I mean, that's all great. I would have thought there would have been more fanfare or discussion about it. All of a sudden, it was just like, oh, he's just kind of done. And, he probably could have done another 10 years.
I don't think so, though. What Saban said when he interviewed was that, when he interviewed about retiring, is that his age started to become an issue, and that's something that never really had happened between recruits and hiring coaches and other people on the staff. He said that people were starting to ask him for assurances. Will you be there for, are you going to be here for 4 years, 5 years, 10 years? Players want assurances. Coaching staff wants assurances. Anybody in that sphere, of he's the CEO of that organization. Anyone in that organization, if Saban is hiring you because you're great, but you could go to 3 or 4 other places, is Saban going to be there? Is the GOAT who brings you on gonna be there to, sing your praises and keep you safe if something happens, right? And Nick Saban said that he got to the point where he didn't feel comfortable giving those assurances anymore. And whether we think he could go another 10 years, maybe he could, but if he wouldn't be able to go those 10 years at that same level of commitment, he doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who is going to do it in any other way than 100% the way he wants to do it. And without being able to commit, like you just can't do that. And I think uh, I think you run into the same thing with Belichick. I think Bill Belichick coaches in the NFL again. Honestly, I don't think Belichick would even take a year off. He'll coach somewhere next season, and I think he wants to do that. But he started to feel like he wasn't going to get those same assurances from the organization. So, whether it's the coach or the organization, at some point, the promise can no longer be made honestly, and that's when it's time to go.
Yeah, I think we got two different topics going here, really. I mean, obviously, there's the coincidence of these three unbelievable Hall of Fame coaches, greatest all time. There'll be statues. I mean, all of that. But there's a couple of side topics that are contributing to all of this. I mean, obviously, their age. I mean, again, Belichick and Carroll. I mean, these guys are 70 years old, and and I'm not going to call them too old. I mean, they've been very, very successful coaches, but I mean, it's just kind of time. The other side of that is how much of the game has changed to the point where maybe these guys are old school. I don't like what's going on with college football. Let's just look at the Saban side of this conversation first. I don't like what's going on with college football. The transfer portal, they may as well have a coaching portal at this point. I mean, if you look at go ahead.
They've always had a coaching portal. Coaches always were allowed to move around. It was the players who never could.
No. I get the rule of that, but I'm saying it facetiously here that just everyone's in a portal. If you're not in a portal, you're about to be. You and I are going to be in podcast portals before too long. I mean, there's no loyalty, there's no
Nobody
time.
will pick me up.
Right. And I don't know how these comments are going to age well, because obviously there's a lot of fluid situations here at the time that we're recording this. But I just here in Washington, and I'll tie it into the big picture and take it all the way back to Saban. Here at Washington, you had Kalen DeBoer take over a program. Here's a guy that was in South Dakota. As some guy, is there football in South Dakota? I don't even know. And then he goes to Indiana, and here's this quarterback, Michael Penix, who was injured all the time. This guy was left for football dead. And all of a sudden, DeBoer says, hey, I got a job going to Washington. Come with me. He takes Penix, and 5 minutes later, he's got an unbelievable winning percentage. This was just last year. Just last year. Penix was a candidate for Heisman Trophy. DeBoer won, he lost 2 games. And then this year, it's pretty well documented, he took the Huskies in his second year as the coach, totally turning around the entire Husky franchise, the whole thing. And he goes 14-0, goes into the national championship, loses to Michigan. Michael Penix is crying, and it's an emotional story, but a great story. And we're all over here in Washington going, wow, this is going to be a great program moving. Wait, what? Nick Saban retired? What? Kalen DeBoer's the new coach? He just landed in Tuscaloosa? And did he even come back to Seattle? I mean, did he he didn't tell the players? He's gone. And there are players, I mean, we're over here crying and thanking him, watching him cry. We're like, oh my God, this is so emotional. What a great story. And now we're crying going, wait a minute, what? You bastard. I can't believe you went to Alabama. And then you're going, but it's Alabama. And the opportunity was there, and he's a good coach. And you're going, okay, we get this. And so that we're mad at him for doing that. So what do we do at Washington? We go down and we get Jed Fish from Arizona, who just got there. We steal him. His running back's already in the portal to come up here. He's depleted that program. He's coming here, and we're okay with that. What a great hire it is. Feeling bad for Arizona. Jim Harbaugh, and I'm almost done. Jim Harbaugh. And again, I don't know
Thanks
if this
for
is
telling
going
me.
to right. Jim Harbaugh, and this may not age well depending on what he does. I think he's going to end up the Chargers coach. But anyway, here's a guy who he comes back. He's a Michigan guy. He wins the national championship, runs the table. Who cares if he only showed up to 9 of the games and the other 6, whatever the hell that was, he's a criminal and a cheater and a rat bastard. But somehow he's the feel-good guy, and we feel bad about this. I'm still pissed about that. But now he's the hottest coaching guy out there, and he's probably going to up and leave Michigan after winning the championship, and he's going to go wherever for $1 billion, and the hell with Michigan. That's where we're at right now, and I'm angry.
I where I want to get though is I think the sentiment, and correct me if I'm wrong, the sentiment about people moving around in college football, and there's also a lot of backlash to players entering the portal. This coaching carousel, it may seem really pronounced for a couple of reasons in 2024. I think one of the reasons is recency bias. It's this one. And I think the other reason is you're it isn't sort of the normal coaching moves. It's the GOAT who retired. So I think there's a lot of, especially there's a lot of microscope on this. You weren't gonna get somebody who is not a seasoned vet with huge potential to take over for Saban because he's that goated level. So there's a lot of spotlight on this particular batch of coaches moving around. But I'll say it happens all the time. And before the transfer portal and before those rules kind of opened up, it really, I think it was unfair to the players. I think in a lot of cases, the NCAA and especially college football, considering the amount of money that football brings in, I'm not going to pretend like I know all about what's fair, not for college gymnasts or softball players, because I don't. But I know the football brings in a ton of money, and I think that they have for a long time treated the labor in that sport unfairly. So now being able to see the players move around, reacting to the coaches move around, I think that levels the playing field. But I also think what it does is kind of brings into focus for everybody that the playing field might be more level now, but it is also still absolutely insane.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really about the players. But unfortunately, it really isn't. It's about the big money coaches and the big money schools and the big money in general. And they've trickled down a few dollars to humor everybody that the players are getting their part of the action. But it's just I I I, I don't know. I mean, yes, as a random fan, sure, great for the parody. It was kind of interesting to see how the college football season shook out this year. But I don't know. I don't know the answer anymore. I just don't
I do.
like. I mean, it used to be that you want to be the next Bo Schembechler at Michigan. You want to be the next it guy that's going to be the famous coach for years and years, and they name the stadium after you later. But that's not the case. I notice as we're looking for a Seattle Seahawks coach out here on the West Coast now. The thing that's crazy to me. Hey, you've got a team in the playoffs and you haven't been there for a while, and you're the offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator. Well, we're gunning for you because you're the next guy that because of this one season and you're the hottest guy, we're going to go get you the coach. And they don't really know how good that coach is going to be. So I think it's taking away from the quality of coaching. That's my eyeball of the situation. I could be wrong, and I'd love to talk to some legit coaches about this and see their take on that. But we're not getting the tried and true coaches. You're getting the Kalen DeBoers, but I guess he's a good coach based on what he did in this very short amount of time. But he hasn't been tried and true. We're going to find out at Bama real fast how good Kalen DeBoer is. I mean, he's certainly the it guy now. He took a program and flipped it around in a very short amount of time. All the gods, football gods, lined up for him. But I guess we'll see how good he is. But it's just like we just jumped at the hottest name and let's see how it goes. It's the best brand wins. It's who's hot right now as opposed to who's got the legit resume. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that you're not all the way wrong there.
Not all the way.
Well, no, I mean, because coaching, I think there's always a little bit of trying to go find the hot guy. It's just that the greats stick around for a really long time, and there might not really be a lot of greats. But like, if you think about, Urban Meyer was like how I'm trying to look real quick, like how long Urban Meyer spent at BYU. Like he was the head coach at Bowling Green, I think in 2001, right? Let me look this up real quick. He was in Utah by 2003, so it's not like he was a tried and true, MAC coach. He went to Utah and he turned Utah around, and by 2007 he was in Florida, right?
Yeah, but that's the thing. He turned Utah around, and
And he
and and he did that, and then he went to Florida and he answered it, and then that qualified him to take over the Ohio State University. That trajectory makes sense to me.
but it's the trajectory makes sense, but it isn't like the timeline is incredibly compressed now, right? 2 years at Bowling Green, 3 years at BYU, 3 years at Florida, and then he's at Ohio State, and he sticks around at Ohio State for a pretty significant amount of time because he's dominating there. And I don't think that there's a question. I have a lot of issue with maybe Urban Meyer, the guy, and Urban Meyer, the moral code, but I don't think there's any doubt that Urban Meyer is one of the greats in college football coaching. And he went from quick turnaround, quick turnaround, quick turnaround, sustained dominance. That's what you're looking at with Kalen DeBauer. You're DeBauer, whatever. You're just, his sustained dominance wasn't gonna happen at Washington. Not for any
It
fault
could
of
have been.
Washington. It's just
I,
not
no,
where. But he had a chance to go to Alabama, just like
yeah,
Urban Meyer had a chance to go to
I
Ohio
get
State.
it. I get it. And that's fine. I'm never going to fault someone who's going to. I mean, we can make someone else's career moves all we want, but at the end of the day, a guy's got to do what he's got to do. He's got a chance to go take over that. I think in the world of radio, if I had a chance to take over the biggest show and do the things, sure, I would jump at that too. I understand that move. But what I'm saying for the sake of the game, I mean, look how much that really hurt the Washington program. And I'm not looking at it as a Washington fan. I'm saying, look at these players that have been left for football dead. Now they got to figure out what they're going to do, and it's hurting the game. It's hurting these guys' careers. So they chose. Look all the guys here that we know. Some players on the Washington team that are up here from the Bellingham area in Ferndale, and we've been talking to these players a lot on our radio show, and they were excited about Kalen DeBoer, and they chose a school that's 100 miles south of where they live, and now they're like, where am I going to transfer to? What am I going to do? What if the new coach doesn't like me? What? And this new opportunistic coach who's probably going to, I mean, this coach that just took over Washington, this coach Fish, Jed Fish, 25 years of coaching, 14 different places, a lot of one and dones. And now here he is. Maybe he's the next guy that's going to stick around for a while and legitimately build up the program. But all indicators are, hey, it's a different world now. We don't know. You're having a 2-year run and out. This reminds me of like watching basketball players. They play high school ball, they play a year at Kentucky, and they're in the draft. It's crazy.
But see, what you just laid out with how the players are kind of stuck now and they don't know what to do, you're kind of over and over making the case for the transfer portal in the NCAA. Those players should be able to move without facing any sort of penalty for it if they had
Yes.
banked their whole career in their recruiting on DeBauer and now he's gone. And
I'm
the
laughing. You're
second
calling him
thing,
DeBauer because it's
is
DeBoer,
it
but he's
DeBoer?
devoured. He's devoured the team. I'm hearing that differently. Yeah, it's Kalen DeBoer. No, I'm
Oh,
with you.
my bad.
I'm with you on the transfer portal thing. Yes, I'm making the case for that. I mean, sure. I'm just saying it's really sad that we can't just have someone choose their school, be loyal to their school, build up a school's program, and then hopefully go on to the pros if that's what they want. The end. Now it's like, God, a guy can end up here, go win a championship for Clemson, end up there's 2 good quarterbacks, so they're going to move him over to here, and the coach may not even be there. I just don't like it's so fluid. It's hard to build up tradition with these schools. And it's going backwards. It's a hollow process.
I disagree. And it isn't, I promise this time it's not just because I want to be argumentative, because usually I do just kind of want to pick at you. Um, but
Thanks.
I really think, if you look at what the NCAA in football has become and the amount of money that it brings in and sort of the fan bases and the traditions and just like how crazy and virulent everyone is about being a fan and wanting their team to compete. Like, I'm an Ohio State fan. I'm 42. So, I mean, you figure I probably started watching Ohio State and paying attention in the early to mid 90s, right?
Mhm.
As one does. I've lived through John Cooper, who was a tried and true at Ohio State, and he was with the school for a long time, and he was an important part of the tradition, and he could not win the big one. He just couldn't do it. And it's easy to look at a guy like Jim Harbaugh now, who was dominated by the Buckeyes and honestly by any big giant national games, right? Dominated by the big teams, and then was able to turn around at the end. Well, it turns out he was able to turn it around with a bunch of cheating, but John Cooper wasn't able to do that. As a fan, as a university president, as an athletic director, as a representative of the Big Ten, as the NCAA commissioner, as ESPN or CBS or whoever is bidding on the TV deals for these conferences, you're sitting in those shoes. John Cooper was tried and true, and he was Ohio State tradition, and he was all those things you're talking about, but he was bad for the bottom line. And maybe he wasn't bad for the bottom line back in the 90s, because the bottom line and the way all that worked, I think, was significantly different than it is now. But that is bad for the bottom line now. Jimbo Fisher leaves Texas A&M after that huge contract and all that promise, and it has nothing to do with wanting to stay consistent at a school. It has nothing to do with trying to keep the players happy or the staffs happy. It's all about, can you compete with the greats? If you're going to be a part of the future super conference of collegiate football, when eventually the top 40 to 60 college football teams break away from the NCAA and they have their own big college football super conference, if you're going to be one of them, can you compete? Can you be a top 10 or 12 team out of that 60? And if you can't, you got to go. And if you can at Washington, then, if you can with the 10th best team, and no shade to Washington,
I get it.
Making rankings in my head real quick.
Sure.
If you can with the 10th best team, then you better be damn sure when the top team has an opening, they're going to come grab you. And that's, I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just very different for us specifically, right? Like old guys like us, even though you're significantly older than me.
Right.
It's different for us to watch that to start to happen, because we have all that history back when college football wasn't a big, like, it was a TV sport, but it wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? Like, there were no commercials, coaches weren't getting advertisements, there weren't NIL deals. Like, it's different for us to see that transformation. But I think in the next decade, when sort of the transformation is done, and I think there's going to be a relatively stable period of time where the NCAA football is this thing for a while, it's all going to be pretty beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I hope you're right. I'm taking a snapshot of the moment, and all I'm saying is, when you look at what just happened to the University of Washington, there was unbelievable excitement over a very short amount of time. A guy came in, and all of a sudden, boom, right out of the box, he's turned this thing around. Michael Penix came out of nowhere. I mean, what an incredible story this was. You heard of this George Clooney movie, Boys in the Boat. I was convinced that there's going to be a follow-up, Boys in the Bowl. It just felt like this is going to be a thing. And, he was we had a Heisman candidate all year long. The team was winning all these close games, so many one-score games. They ran the table. They beat Oregon, their arch nemesis, twice. This would be like Ohio State beating Michigan twice and running the table, going undefeated, beating the Penn States of the world and maybe a couple other top 15 teams, and then going to the national championship undefeated. Out of nowhere, Washington football was back. Greatest season they've ever had, most wins, first time undefeated, and they're playing for a national title, the Natty. I mean, wow. And literally right after the game ended, it was like a dream. It didn't even happen. I mean, you woke up the next day going, wait, and we're watching footage of a plane landing in Tuscaloosa going, wait, what? There was just so much excitement, and they've depleted it. And then Washington answers with what appears to be, at least for now, a good hire. But that guy
Mhm.
just did the same thing to Arizona. And it just feels like it's just they're nuking these programs after being there for 5 minutes. And I'm just saying, I think it's sad. And it's not, I've just talked to some actual players on that Husky team. And I'm like, dude, I just feel bad for you because, I mean, I'm just an idiot fan, whatever. Our teams are going to do whatever.
Yeah,
But when
true.
you think, but you think about the collective fan base and the Husky Nation, and you think about how much that just hurt a region. It just kind of sucks, and that's the state of it today, and it bums me out. I don't think anyone's ever had the right answer for college football. Let's have a 4-team playoff. Oh, that's not enough. Let's switch to a 12-team playoff. So next year we can argue about 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. It doesn't matter. It's just always going to be this, and it's hard. Football is hard. College football is harder.
I have a question, and I know you've got actual. We're running up against time here, so this won't be long. And I know you've got actual, media relationships and sourcing and stuff with the work that you do for your day job. So off the record, or I guess on the record because it's on the podcast, but no names, no anything. And the players who you've talked to that are, sore about DeBoer, DeBauer.
Kalen
I
DeBoer.
did it again. DeBoer. DeBoer. DeBoer.
DeBoer.
All right,
The
like a wild
Bears.
pig. I got it.
The
All right.
Bears. DeBoer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But about him leaving, are they planning on transferring? Are they
That's
looking
the
at it?
question. That's what they're wondering. They don't know because it's not really. I mean, did they want to stay at Washington? Did they buy in? Yes. And literally, they're coming off of a high of. I mean, we just played the national championship, and within 48 hours, this went down. And now
Okay, so
everyone's
I
like,
have
okay,
another question.
okay.
I have another question though. Hold that thought there. They're wondering whether or not they should transfer, and they're going through those emotions, and maybe some of them have all, at this point. Um, is there anything in their mind that is going to either keep them there or have them leave? This switch to the Big Ten in 2024. I don't know if you've seen the schedule, but Washington's schedule, not everybody in the Big Ten is great, but next year, in the regular season, they play Michigan out of the Big Ten, Penn State out of the Big Ten, and they still play. They only play the good teams from the Pac-12, right? So they
Mhm.
play USC, UCLA, Oregon next year. But adding Michigan, adding Penn State into that schedule, they play Iowa. I mean, Iowa can't score anything, but they sure as hell have a solid defense. I mean, is there anything that they've talked about, moving to the Big Ten and what that's going to look like?
Well, that's the thing. That's why I wanted Pete Carroll to take over the Huskies. So before you say it's a crazy idea, he was at
It's a crazy idea.
USC. He won a championship at USC,
Hmm.
and the guy acts like he's 45 years old. And I believe, if Harbaugh leaves Michigan, and again, it may have already happened to someone listening to this podcast, who knows? But if Harbaugh leaves there, I think Day is in a little bit of question there at Ohio State. Hasn't been able to beat Michigan. Scored 3 points in his bowl game against Missouri. And it just seems like, I mean, again, and he's a good coach and all that, but just hear me out on this. Wouldn't it have been interesting to see Pete Carroll recruit into that situation while it seemed like a bit of a
Oh
down year
God.
in recruiting?
Oh God. No, look, you don't have to. I I'm sad that I don't get to, backhandedly congratulate Andy on the Wolverines winning with all of the Harbaugh cheating and all of that. But whatever you want to say about Harbaugh and cheating, I think Harbaugh has set up a really good program there. Whether or not they would have won the national championship, whether or not they would have been on that huge run and dominated, the Buckeyes in the game and all their big rivals, I don't know. But I think even without that, Harbaugh had set up a really good program there.
Well,
Um,
and again,
but I think,
I want to congratulate Harbaugh on his 9-0 season. I do. And
yeah,
I think he had a really good 9-0
yeah.
season this year.
But I think that if you want to talk about Ryan Day and say that, oh, maybe he's not great, or oh, he's got a checkered record. Like, I think
No, 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 no,
it's
no. That's not what I'm
fair
saying.
to say that he's a pretty big fraud, I think. Look at what CJ Stroud's doing in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. Look at the running backs that we've had, the wide receivers that were first round picks that are playing in the NFL that are great, the defenses that they've had. That Ryan Day cannot get into the playoffs, win playoff games, win national championships with that group of talent. Eventually, he's going to run himself out of recruiting potential just by never winning. He's bringing in top-notch guys and developing them into top-notch NFL players.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that counts for something. That
No, no,
staff doing that counts
no,
for
all
something.
I'm saying,
but not winning national championships is.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I think Ryan Day is great. Obviously Ohio State's they're just always
I do not.
reloading. Well, what I'm saying from a standpoint, I don't know what you were disagreeing with me there. You kind of had a weird reaction on that because what I was
I
saying.
wasn't. I said you should say that Ryan Day is a fraud.
Oh, well, but the way I thought you were disagreeing with me initially there when I talked about Pete Carroll, because I thought, yeah, and again, I mean, I get that it's kind of a weird thing to say, but at the same time, why not Pete Carroll? Because Ryan Day could be having a down recruiting time. Obviously, the program took a bit of a jolt there with that bowl game, and they've lost 3 in a row, maybe 4 in a row to Michigan, and they lost to Michigan this year. And so there's an opening for a team like Washington to enter the Big Ten and stand a chance and maybe get an edge with a Pete Carroll type figure to maybe help with that recruiting situation, with Harbaugh potentially not even being there and your top schools have it. Ohio State coming off of an off year. Pete Carroll would have been an interesting choice there, as wacky as that sounds.
No, I think Pete Carroll in Washington would have been fantastic. I think that I get the feeling that Pete Carroll is probably done coaching at top level football for and maybe I'm wrong, and I think that football will have lost a valuable voice and a valuable ally to players with Pete Carroll being gone. I really do. I think Pete Carroll's fantastic. I would take him today at Ohio State over Ryan Day without a doubt. But you do also get to the point where I think you go back to the very beginning of the show when we were talking about Saban. Pete Carroll started coaching in 1973, and he's been a head coach back and forth since 97. It is 2024. That's 50 years of coaching. Like, at some point, no matter how much I love and respect what Pete Carroll's done on a football field at every level, I think you just get to the point where you can't promise people you're going to be there for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, and I don't think that would have been the case.
When you might think, you might feel like it, but you might not physically be able to do it. And I think I think life gets interrupted at that age quite regularly, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think you get to the point where that could potentially start to hamper promising people that you're going to be around.
Final thought on that, and then we can wrap it up. The sidebar to my theory on that, and a lot of people don't know this. So Jed Fish was at Arizona. He's the guy that turned the Wildcats around. The Wildcats finished number 11 when it was all said and done. The Wildcats lost to Washington, 1-score game. So now Jed Fish takes over at Washington. Do you know who his OC is going to be and who it was at Arizona? Brandon Carroll, son of Pete Carroll. So Pete Carroll comes in as the head coach, and then he can promise his 4 years of the system. They build in that Brandon Carroll is going to take over as the head coach in 2 years, and there you go. Something to keep an eye on. I think we should leave it there.
I think that's a good idea. Hey, I wasn't able to get the live stream working today, which is kind of a bummer, and I don't know why. But we will be up We will be up on YouTube soon. Probably we're recording this on Wednesday night, so I'm going to venture to say Thursday sometime in the afternoon. And guys, this one's going to be real content. Anyway, you could find us at 3 Guys in 3 Cities on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. That's at 3 Guys 3 Cities, the number 3. Don't spell it out. 3 Guys 3 Cities. That's all I have to say, Alan. That's it, man. I'm done.
Absolutely. Our best to Andy and his family, and hopefully they can get all that stuff behind him. He's Josh Flagner in Cleveland. I'm Allan Fee in the Pacific Northwest in the hometown of Bellingham, Washington. Be at peace, and we will talk to you again next time right here with 3 Guys in 3 Cities.